Apparently, the demo god has special powers to ban people from watching AEW Dynamite. We talk about it next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. Joining me is Ralph Valenti. If you were on Twitter over the weekend, you may have saw Chris Jericho banning Jim Cornette from watching AEW Dynamite and AEW Dark due to his criticisms from his podcast. Ralph, did you see the tweet, and what are your thoughts about it?
I did see the tweet, and just when you thought the wrestling industry was safe and isolated, the cancel culture has certainly come for some members within it. I think what we have here is a case of Chris Jericho really working the room, right? So we have to remember that Chris Jericho is a front man in the band called Fozzy, and you and I both know that there's something that people refer to as working the room. That's essentially where the front man or a member of the band goes out, talks to members within the crowd, tries to get them engaged, entertained, and keep them involved with the show so that way they continue to come back.
Right.
I think Chris Jericho is a guy who has, obviously he's been in the industry for a very long time. And I think that's all this is a case of Chris Jericho knowing that he is going to get a reaction, whether it's a reaction from Jim Cornette, the fans, people reacting on Twitter. And, with Jim Cornette, he's a very divisive guy. He's not going to enjoy most of what AEW does. He's mostly going to talk poorly of AEW. And when that happens, people react, mostly the AEW fans. The other side of that is Jim Cornette does have
he has a strong following.
It's a following that is very devoted to him too. So if the people who listen to Jim Cornette see what Chris Jericho is saying, there's obviously going to be some banter between the two fan bases. So I think that's all we have here is just where Chris Jericho is working the room, saying these things because he knows it's going to get attention and it's going to get people talking and interested in the AEW program, whether they like it or dislike it.
Right. I totally agree. And yes, there are passionate AEW fans and there's passionate Jim Cornette fans. I mean, that's why they call him the cult of Cornette because, those that follow Jim Cornette are very passionate about what he has to say. He's a guy that's been in the business, 50 years, has a lot of experience, both good and bad. And, people listen to him for his opinion on professional wrestling. Chris Jericho, he has, 30 years in professional wrestling and the same thing. People will go to him and look at his experience and use that as their opinion. So whether you're an AEW fan or a Cornette fan or even both, there are people out there that are fans of both. So I think what the problem is, and I think this is just in wrestling in general, is that you can have an opinion, but if someone disagrees, you got to have like a debate on who's right and wrong rather than here's what I think, here's what you think, agree to disagree. Agree to disagree has gone out the window. Chris Jericho here with his tweet, which here is the actual tweet that he said. The tweet was, I'm officially banning Jim Cornette from watching any and all future episodes of AEW Dynamite and AEW Dark. He is under AEW suspension. I mean, first off, this is a joke. If you don't take it as a joke, maybe you don't catch sarcasm on the internet. I know it's kind of hard sometimes to catch sarcasm on Twitter and social media. But maybe Jim Cornette didn't catch the sarcasm or he's being sarcastic back because he did respond. He said, Chris, I appreciate your consideration for my sanity, but I do it as a service to the wrestling fans. They need some measure of comfort in these cosplay times we're in. But don't worry, I never watch Dark. P.S. Careful of the drooling bikers. Hashtag a little bit of the virus. Hashtag COVID God. Obviously, that referring to the concerts that Fozzy had over the weekend in North Dakota and South Dakota that a lot of people are frowning upon, especially during a pandemic, and especially when Chris Jericho is about to be on AEW Dynamite to face Orange Cassidy this coming Wednesday. It's not really the best move. I know people are calling for him to quarantine. We'll see how that goes. Probably not going to happen, but back to the debate of Jericho and Cornette. To me, Jericho is being kind of childish where it's like, can you not accept criticism? Or is it where he's like, okay, whatever. You're going to make fun of my promotion. I'm going to just say you're banned. That's it. Making a joke of it. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it goes back to the debate we've had quite some time ago about just the tribalism that exists in professional wrestling today. And if you want a good example of that, just go to any of our Dynamite reviews when I call out Orange Cassidy for some of the things he does and look at the way people react to me. So yes, it is certainly possible to be critical of a product and still support it. I love AEW. I enjoy it mostly every single week, and I enjoy a good 95% of the show. And there's some parts of AEW that, I do get Jim Cornette's point of view and his perspective. And I respect his perspective, especially considering he has so many years in the industry. To really dismiss his particular point of view, whether it is outdated or old fashioned or anything like that. I mean, it still comes from experience, and a lot of experience, as you pointed out, 50 plus years. So, I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate that it's kind of gotten to this where now we're going to have this back and forth between Jericho and Cornette. But like I said, I still think this is mostly a shoot work, whatever you want to call it. Chris Jericho knowing what type of reaction he's going to get from the followers of Jim Cornette or the cult of Cornette or the people that follow him. And even Jim Cornette, look, we know that people are going to talk about this whole thing going forward. It'll probably make the dirt sheets. It'll probably go back and forth, and it's probably going to get highlighted on Jim Cornette's podcast this week at some point. Yep. And he'll really cut in on Chris Jericho, and Chris Jericho will probably rebuttal. And you know what? People will continue talking about it. But the one thing I will point out is this. You mentioned 50 plus years in the industry. That's a lot of that 50 plus demo that Chris Jericho doesn't necessarily talk about. He talks about the primary target audience, that 18 to 49 that AEW consistently pulls in. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is kind of their way of getting a little bit of attention, knowing that, Jim Cornette does have this following. It's mostly the older fan base, I'd imagine. And Chris Jericho is calling him out on social media to try and get people to look over here. It's kind of like, going in somebody's backyard and setting off a firework. Well, the homeowners are probably going to come outside. The neighbors might come outside. The dog might wander out to look for some food, but at least you're getting some type of attention. Now, this is the thing that I want to know. Should we assume at this point Chris Jericho is a member of the cult of Cornette? I mean, where's he getting the information? Is it his assistant? Is it somebody on the Fozzy tour bus? Does he listen to the podcast? Does he hear the criticism from Jim himself?
Well, I mean, Chris Jericho and Jim Cornette go a long way. Like, Chris Jericho was in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I mean, the infamous Dairy Queen tirade that Cornette had, Chris Jericho is the one that taped it.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, there's probably like this in the front, they're arguing. In the back, they're probably, bumping elbows and laughing at it. It's like, honestly, we all think as wrestling fans today that kayfabe is dead, which for the most part it is, thanks to social media and wrestlers not doing their part in social media to keep kayfabe. Chris Jericho, I think, is keeping kayfabe. Like, this is stuff the demo god character of Chris Jericho would do. Like, yeah. This is stuff that, he's bantering to this very, very niche audience of AEW that really focus in on the ratings, that, are very anti Jim Cornette. Oh, anybody that bashes AEW is no good. Their opinion doesn't matter. AEW could do no wrong. There's definitely fans out there, and I've seen them. I've seen them in even our own comments. I even put a poll up last year. Can AEW do no wrong? And like 25% of people said, no, they can't. So, that's the thing. And Cornette obviously is going to be one of those that says, you know what? They do a lot wrong. And as someone experienced in the industry, here's how you fix it. Jericho, with that experience that he has, is trying to maybe fix that stuff. But at the same time, it's hard because he's kind of the minority in this, where you got all these guys coming from the independents going, this is what our fans like, and we're going to do what our fans like. Jericho's like, yep. That's not really how it works all the time. Like the tag rules, for example. But and that's the thing. Like, if you listen to a Cornette podcast and listen to his criticisms, maybe you learn something from it. Maybe you don't. If you watch AEW Dynamite, after being a longtime wrestling fan, maybe you notice things that are just new and fresh. Maybe you don't. It's not for me to decide what your opinion is. That's not what we're here for. We're not here to persuade your opinion. We're just here to talk about ours. And if you want to discuss them in the comments, feel free. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, and the most recent criticism that Brian Last, who is the other member of the show with Jim Cornette. So Jim Cornette, they share the opinion that Chris Jericho, when he first came to AEW, he first had his title reign and the Inner Circle was created. That's when Jericho was at his best. Then he moved into, having the football match, as they call it, having the feud against Matt Hardy with the drones and beating up the drones and all of that stuff. And now he's moving into this program with Orange Cassidy. And their argument is Chris Jericho's above this. He's too big of a star. He doesn't need to be doing these silly things. But here's where I understand and respect that opinion, but I have to disagree. As critical as I am of Orange Cassidy, there are certainly people within AEW and of course in our comment section and his devout followers that feel like he can be the next big thing in professional wrestling. The only way you're going to know if he's the next big thing is throwing him out there with some bigger stars, some established guys, and having him have matches with those people. So that's literally how you make your name in professional wrestling. Now, I don't know if Orange Cassidy is the next big thing. We all know my point of view if you've followed this podcast for a long time. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But my point is this. This can't be WCW all over again where you continue to parade out former guys that are past their prime. And Chris Jericho is still very good, but he's certainly not in his prime, I don't think.
Right.
In certain aspects of his career, yeah. I mean, he can certainly go on the mic. In the ring, he's certainly slowed down a little bit. Physically, he's a little pudgy in the waistline, but whatever. He's done that purposely, so it's not a negative thing. It is what it is. Everyone's got a little pudge. But here's my point. They can't just put the former WWE guys over, the older guys over. You'll literally have TNA all over again. You'll literally have WCW all over again. So they're trying to feature their guys, your Darby Allins, your Orange Cassidys. That's why these guys are having feuds with some of the top guys that came from WWE or the more established stars. That's a better way to put it. So yeah, I understand Jim's perspective and the criticism, but again, it's okay to disagree.
Right.
I listened to his podcast, and as critical as I am of Orange Cassidy, I understand what they're trying to accomplish there. So there's that. It's okay to disagree in wrestling. It's okay to go at each other sometimes in the comment section or on Twitter, but people just go overboard. And I think what we have here is just two guys who have been in the industry a long time that know they're going to get some type of reaction out of the fans, which is what you need and what you want.
And I think obviously the one thing that Jim Cornette talks about the most is protecting the business. Yes. What better way to do that is to have this character talk about things and keep the character, whether on a podcast or on social media. And that's what Jim Cornette is. He's a character. You know, I remember watching the Undertaker documentary, and there's a spot where Bray Wyatt says the Undertaker is always at 10. You know, the best characters in wrestling are the ones that take it to 10. Well, Undertaker's always at 10. Jim Cornette is always at like 50, you know, when it comes to that. So I have no problem whatsoever with this little back and forth banter. It's a little childish, but at the same time, it's getting people to talk. It's even getting us to have a full-fledged video on this discussion. And I have no problem with it. And it's not the first time we've had it. We actually had this same discussion about a month or so ago after Double or Nothing, where Chris Jericho said, if you didn't like the Stadium Stampede match, you have no soul. So it's basically that same thing. Yes, there are people that did not like the Stadium Stampede match. We got it. But at the same time, there are people that loved it. And we're of those that love it. So agree to disagree.
Yeah. And this is the thing. Wrestling is very much entertainment at the same time. I can't force somebody to go out there and say, Goodfellas is a good movie. Some people watch that movie and aren't fans of it. I can't force somebody to watch Dumb and Dumber and find it funny. It's the same thing. You can't force somebody to share your perspective on something that's just subjective. It's up to the person and the individual to pretty much say what they enjoy. Jim Cornette doesn't enjoy some parts of AEW, and that's fine. And he praises certain parts of AEW as well. So, you know, you can't just silence your critics. How are you going to learn if you aren't willing to take some criticism?
Exactly. But if you have criticism, you're supposed to ban them and block them and do all this other stuff. You know, go to your safe place where, you know.
No cancel culture here, at least not on this show.
Right.
By the way.
What?
I hope Orange Cassidy gets his ass kicked this week. Screw that guy. I found orange juice in my refrigerator. Mind you, it was outdated by 3 days because I don't drink it. My wife drinks it. You know what I did with it?
You threw it
I dumped it down the drain, just like Chris Jericho is going to do with Orange Cassidy this week. Fucking loser. Get me off the show. Let's go.
All right. The hate for Orange Cassidy continues, but let us know in the comments what you guys think of this banter between Chris Jericho and Jim Cornette. Don't forget to share this all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. And for news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.